I'd like to welcome all Chess.com viewers to this new and hopefully exciting series on crushing with the King's Gambit. So we're going to be basically looking at 5 videos in total on the very exciting romantic King's Gambit opening, an opening which I've actually played for most of my life. Probably one of the only grandmasters who still seems to get away with playing this occasionally. It's a fascinating opening. I mean, I expect every chess player knows about the King's Gambit, and really I think it's the most romantic chess opening there is about. So it's something that I have to say has gone out of fashion a little bit recently because of the use of computers. But if we just, some of the games we're going to have a look at here demonstrate that it can still be a very powerful weapon. And well, the King's Gambit's been played in some of these famous games that I'm sure a lot of viewers out there would have seen. So we had the Immortal game. It's really kind of classed as coffeehouse chess. White tries to sacrifice all his pieces, goes straight for the black king, and happy to give up pawns, happy to give up pieces as long as he gets an attack going. And the games I've picked here, just to let you know what these 5 videos are going to include, I've tried to pick 5 very exciting games, but I've also tried to pick 5 games which have some theme throughout them so that you can feel kind of brave enough to give the King's Gambit a go in the future. Now, the first 3 games in this video series are going to concentrate on the moves, the variation e4, e5. And now the King's Gambit is when white plays f4. And, well, if we just compare this to the Queen's Gambit is the same thing, but the other way around. The King's Gambit is a much more dangerous opening for both sides, because after this f4 move, the white king can sometimes be weak, but also white aims to get very good attack against the weak square on f7. So this is one of the key points in the King's Gambit. And indeed, this is one theme I've tried to concentrate on, attacking the f7 square. Now, the first 3 videos are all going to be based on the sequence of moves pawn takes f4, obviously the most critical choice. I will briefly talk about other options in one of the other videos later on, so you can jump forward to that if you wish to see what I recommend there. And now knight to f3. So the first 3 videos are on knight to f3. The last 2 videos in the series are on bishop to c4, which is a move I normally favour to play myself, bishop to c4. But recently I've just found some very exciting ideas with knight to f3. So this will probably be my choice in future games. Now, ex-Soviet player Bronstein, who is probably classified as one of the most imaginative grandmasters ever to grace the game of chess, basically said that you should play knight f3 to draw and bishop to c4 to win with white. Now, of course, this is based on a very old theory. And what we're going to be taking a look at in the first 3 videos is the move g5 here. Now, this is a move that has meant to have refuted the King's Gambit with knight to f3. And Bobby Fischer actually said about g5, this is the refutation of the King's Gambit, this move g5. And to be honest, this is why a lot of people have stopped playing the King's Gambit, because of this move. So I'm not going to look at other options for white. I suggest that you can do that yourself instead of g5. I mean, just briefly, what you're trying to aim to achieve with the King's Gambit, it can be quite a positional opening as well as a romantic opening. If you can win back the pawn on f4, so if you can simply go pawn to d4 and bishop takes f4, you will have a lovely position. Why will you have a lovely position? Well, you will have 2 strong pawns in the center of the board, controlling the center. You will have nicely developed pieces. And later on, when you castle kingside, we come back to this theme of having this great f-file that you can attack along. So your basic idea in the King's Gambit is not just to go completely mad and checkmate your opponent's king, as we will see, this does occur, but your first positional idea is simply to go f4 and then to take back your pawn. If you can win the pawn, you'll be much better. That's why black should try to hang on to the pawn, the f4 pawn, by playing this move g5 often, because if he loses the pawn, you know, white can only be better. Other things we're going to look at with this knight to f3 move is really, like I mentioned before, concentration on the f7 square. But against the move g5, which is what we're looking at, I'm recommending now the move knight to c3. Now, this is a move that was actually recommended to me by the German grandmaster Carsten Müller, who's quite well known for his endgames. And I'm using some of the ideas he approached me with here and told me about. So I have to thank Carsten Müller for some of the ideas. There's also a great book I should mention by John Shaw on the King's Gambit, which I should also mention I've used to take a lot of ideas from and develop. So Carsten Müller and John Shaw, thank you very much. But this move knight to c3, in my opinion, is the best way of meeting the move g5. Now, here there are a number of options. In this game, we're going to concentrate on the move g4, which looks like a very logical continuation, and black wants to play queen to h4 check next. So this is something I'm sure if you play this variation with your two knights developed, you will get over the board on a regular basis. Now, the game we're going to be taking a look at here is between Jesus Sepulveda. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but I'm sure I've pronounced Jesus right. So we're taking Jesus on the white side. That can't be a bad thing. And on the black side, we have Prito Ignosaro. Again, pronunciation of the surname could be wrong, so I do apologize. But not two of the most well-known players. Apparently, the player on the white side, Jesus, is, I believe, a physics professor, maybe in Spain. But here he plays a phenomenally beautiful game. So as well as hopefully teaching you some theory here, I'm also going to be teaching you some how to attack, keeping this theme I've looked at in other videos, attacking brilliancy, and things you should be looking out for when hacking, attacking, going for your opponent's king. So all these themes are going to be looked at in this game. Now, g4 is the move for concentrate here. Now, what else can black play? Well, black can play stuff like bishop g7, d6, knight c6. All these moves are going to be looked at in the next game and the third game. Now, generally against each of these moves, if black doesn't play g4, you have two ways of playing. Now, one way is to go h4 and play in a completely crazy style. And then after g4, you plonk your f3 knight on g5. And then you go for the f7 pawn and you even sacrifice your knight on f7. So that's one very exciting way to play against, should I say, less critical lines in this position. Now, the other way you can play is simply to go d4 first, getting a big center, and then trying to break this pawn formation of f4 and g5 with a move g3. So this is maybe the more traditional way to play. If black doesn't do anything forcing, you can go d4 and g3. This is going to be our main recommended line. But anyway, after knight to c3, the critical move is g4. And here, well, there's some interesting options. I actually spent a lot of time in this position analyzing the move d4 here, simply sacrificing the knight on f3. And we're going to have a look at this theme a bit later on. But one of the ideas behind this romantic way of playing is that after queen takes f3, you are just trying to go bishop c4 and aim for f7. Even though you're a piece down, you can still get a very dangerous attack here. So this is something we'll look at in other variations. But in this particular line, after the move g4 here, the best move is knight to e5. And this sets up a deadly trick. Now, queen to h4 check, I'm sure is the move that most people will face here. This looks like the most dangerous move, clearly, to white. Just briefly, knight to c6 is quite interesting in this position. But then I suggest you can simply take on g4 with your knight. And after queen h4, your knight can drop back to f2. And now after bishop c5, it would look like on the surface, white is on serious trouble here because of the f2 pawn. But here you can actually play the breakout move d4. And after something like bishop takes d4, queen to f3. And this gives white a fine position. But I know that most people in this position after knight to e5 will go queen to h4 check. No doubt about it. Now, here you should play with g3. Very interesting and exciting move. Of course, black should take the pawn on g3. Already a completely mad, unbalanced position here. And it looks like white's king is in serious trouble, but you'll get this kind of crazy position often in the King's Gambit. This is why the opening is so fun to play. And here you should play queen takes g4. And this is certainly the best way to play. Now, theoretically speaking, we're not going to spend, too much on the deep theoretical side, because I'm just going to give you a taster. And the lines I'm suggesting here, I've checked with the computer, they are fine for white. So I do want to give you a basic repertoire, but also show you some brilliant chess as well. But here, black has two choices. Now, the move that black played in the game was g2 check, a very logical choice, because black is going to win a rook on h1, but actually a mistake. Now, the best move here is queen takes g4. And here, this is slightly disappointing because the queen's exchanged, but it does seem that white is better after something like knight to g4. And now, let's say d5, creating a threat against the knight on g4. And now knight to e3, I think, is the best move. Point being, if d4, we can come in with knight to b5. And now, after take on an e3, we take on c7, and we take on a8, and we get a very interesting position, but the computer quite likes white after d takes e3. So this is very interesting, but I'd be happy to play this with the white pieces. At the moment, white is material up. You just have to be a little bit careful about your knight on a8 here. But instead of this, I do think the most natural move after queen takes g4 is the move g2 check here. And this looks rather obvious, but in actual fact, it's a major mistake. And now after queen takes h4, black takes on h1 and makes a queen. So we've had a very amusing sort of trade there, where black's g-pawn has motored down the board. But in actual fact, this e-pawn has taken on f4, taken on g3, gone to g2, gone to h1, queen. So a really funny sequence of events for the pawn. And white has sacrificed the rook. Now, one thing you can't be afraid to do in the King's Gambit, you cannot be afraid to sacrifice pieces and pawns. If you're afraid of being a pawn down, sacrificing, I'm afraid you've picked the wrong opening. And you'll probably be suited to something a little bit more calming than the King's Gambit. On other hands, if you're a romantic attacking player who enjoys very interesting positions where you can go for your opponent's king gun blazing in Kowtow style, then this is the opening for you. And after white's next move, queen to h5, it seems that black is already on the verge of defeat. Now, the threat in this position is to simply go queen takes f7 check, and then queen takes f8 checkmate. How can black deal with this threat? In the game, black played bishop to d6, which may not be the best way of defending. Let's just very quickly have a look at some of the other options. Well, knight to h6 looks obvious. This knight defends the f7 square, but now we can develop and play a move that attacks the defender of f7. And even though we're rook down here, this position is just winning for white. For example, you could go knight to c6 or d6, doesn't matter too much. And now we just simply take on h6. Black cannot allow us to take on f7, so we should get rid of the knight. But then after queen takes e5 check, we're going to win the rook on h8 with a clearly winning position. So against knight to h6, the strong move d4 is certainly in white's favour. Now, probably the best way to defend here, there's a number of ways. For example, bishop to e7. Let's just have a look at this as well. This does try to get some defensive pieces around the black king. And now, if queen takes f7, we can't go queen to f8, checkmate. But here, there's a very beautiful line. And I think the best move here, in actual fact, is knight takes f7. And this keeps more threats in the position than simply taking our queen, because now we have a discovered check with our knight. One beautiful variation here, really beautiful variation, is knight to f6, which looks fairly logical. Black is attacking the queen. And now what can we play? Well, it's checkmate in 3 moves here. Forced checkmate. See if you can solve it. If you want to, pause the video very briefly. It's a checkmate we're going to see later on in the game. What do you start with? Knight to d6 check. Now, if king to f8, queen to f7 checkmate, the black king has to go to d8. And now this beautiful idea, smothered mate. If you still haven't seen the checkmate, take a time out here. And now queen to e8 check. A beautiful move. And whatever black captures the queen with, you're going to play knight to f7, checkmate. So a very beautiful combination, that one. And that just shows some of the dangers that black has in this position. The combination of knight and queen attacking is simply too strong. So, well, let's have a look at the game, because the game was also very beautiful. And instead of bishop to e7, bishop to d6 was the move that was played. And now, well, you could take on f7 with the knight here. This is not such a bad move. Instead, white decided to go queen takes here. I mean, if knight takes here, it's slightly different than before, because the black king has the e7 square to escape to. Obviously, it should still be very good for white, this position. But queen takes f7 check. This forces the issue. The king has to go to d8. And now, well, wait, I mean, another good tip here, when you're attacking and you have an attacking position, you have the initiative, one thing you often need to do is have the magic number of 3 pieces attacking. At the moment, you have the queen and knight attacking. So you need to look at other ways to bring your pieces into the game. Now, it strikes me that the black king on d8 is very weak on the dart squares. So if you can get your dart square bishop into the attack, that should be very strong. And here d4 is the right way to play that. Preparing bishop g5 check and castles queenside. So Jesus is certainly playing a great game of chess here. And now knight to e7, and tries to defend against his check. But now, again, when you're attacking, you need to play with energy, especially when you're material down. And here you are a rook down because the black queen has taken your rook on h1. So if you start playing passively, or you start playing a little bit with not enough energy, your initiative is going to be diminished and you're going to run out of play. You might get into an ending and you might just be lost because you're material down. So here, bishop to g5, energetic move, creating more threats. And now knight to b on c6 was played, trying to give extra defense to this e7 square. Now, if rook to e8 here, trying to defend it another way, we can play knight to d5, increasing the pressure, energetic play here. And after some sequence like queen to e4 check, we can go bishop to e2. And now let's say black tries c6 here, trying to force his knight away. Well, there's a beautiful combination here. I don't know if you can see it. What is the best move? There's 2 great moves here. But one of the prettiest moves here is queen takes e7 check. Point being, if bishop takes e7, knight to f7, checkmate. And if rook takes e7, we can go knight to f7 check, take on d6, and then take everything. We're going to take every single piece, leading to a winning material advantage for us. So that was one very nice line. But we can see here that white has very good play for his rook. And let's now see how the game finished. So knight b c6. Remember, you're attacking. You need to play energetically. Now, what's the most energetic move here? Forwards, knight to d5. I mean, you could have played something like castles queenside, but again, the more energetically you can play, generally the better. And this creates threats of, well, first of all, taking on c6, removing a defender to e7, and then taking on e7 with a bishop. Have a look at that position, pause the video if you just want to check that yourself. So one idea is knight takes c6 and taken on e7. Okay, well, black tried to take on e4 check. White blocked the check. And here, black's in an awful amount of trouble here. What can he play? Well, if he takes on d5 with his queen, we simply win his queen. Queen takes d5 because of the pin on the king. So that's not a good idea. What other moves can he play? Well, if he goes something like bishop takes e5, we just go bishop takes e7 check, leading to checkmate, as hopefully you can see. So here, black joined in the fun, and he played, I guess, this one of the reasons I like this game. It reminds me of an old romantic game, maybe from, you know, the 19th century, where one side gives up a rook, but the other side kind of joins in the fun and takes as many pieces as he can, and even maybe realizing he's going to lose the game, but he plays in this is a very romantic game, this one. And one of the things, you know, if you're playing chess, the King's Gambit is the most romantic of openings, and you will get this kind of thing occasionally, this kind of game. And here, well, black played queen to h1 check, and after king to d2, he played queen takes a1. So now black is 2 rooks up. But there's 2 ways to force checkmate here. One is clearly much more beautiful than the other one. Now, I suppose the boring way to force checkmate here would be, well, is boring. Is that really, am I really allowed to say forcing checkmate is a boring thing to do? I don't know if that's terminology correct, because I'm sure whenever we force checkmate in our game of chess, we're never that bored. We're always quite happy. But the simple way to force checkmate here is to take away defender of the e7 knight. So simply by playing knight to c6 check. And then after black takes this, we take on e7 with check. And it's going to be checkmate next move. For example, king d7, knight to f6 checkmate. So that's one way of doing it, but there's a much more romantic in the style of the King's Gambit here. Can you see the checkmate? So I've pointed out knight takes c6 checkmate, but there's another move here which I have to admit is one of the most beautiful checkmates I've personally seen. Can you find the other checkmate in this position? Just pause the video if you need to do that here. Well, the checkmate is queen to e8 check. A completely ridiculous looking move. So it looks like black can take this queen with two pieces, the rook or the king. But if black takes with the rook, well, hopefully you can see what's going to happen then. If rook takes e8, we're just going to go knight to f7, smothered checkmate. Remember earlier we showed a similar theme to this. Black felt obliged to take with king on e8, so this is precisely what he did. King takes e8. And now, can you see the checkmate here? Checkmate in two moves, knight to f6 check, and wherever the king moves, it's going to be checkmate next move. If king to d8, knight to f7, a beautiful double knight checkmate. And if the king moves to f8, which I believe happened in the game, bishop to h6 checkmate. So there was certainly a touch of the holy in that game, and I think Jesus could well have been the Son of God in that game. A beautiful game, and really one of the best King's Gambit games I've ever seen. Really nice attacking play, lovely sacrifices combined with aggressive, energetic play. When you play the King's Gambit, this is what you need to do. You need to play with energy. Let's just go over the important moments before we move on. Well, if you want to move on, hopefully you do, to the next video in this series. So the important moments were, after this knight to f3 move, we're concentrating on g5. My main suggestion here is knight to c3, the double knight development. If black doesn't play g4, we'll move on to that in the next game, have a look at possibilities there. If he does play g4, we can go forwards with our knight. Then after the very tempting queen h4 check, we simply block with g3. And if pawn takes pawn, we take on g4 with our queen. Happy to enter into a slightly better ending if queen takes queen. But if black plays the obvious g2 check, we have queen takes h4, and then queen to h5, ganging up on the f7 square. A square that is a very weak point in black's position. A very beautiful game, very beautiful finish, and a very good taster, I hope, for the King's Gambit. So hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please look at the other videos in this series.